Good evening, everyone. I am so happy that you are joining me here. Tonight, we are going to be talking about where to start with feeding challenges. Now, I do want to let you know that this special Facebook Live that I'm doing right now is really geared towards professionals. So if you're any sort of professional, an OT like myself, speech therapist, a teacher, a dietitian, a pediatrician, and you have any involvement, teachers too. I know there are a lot of teachers out there working in um, from toddlers and preschooler settings on up into elementary school that are looking to support feeding in a positive and the best way possible, because we are seeing more and more and more kids with really severe feeding problems. And I know many of you out there that are either working directly on feeding or are simply supporting feeding or want to be able to give parents some helpful tips are looking for some strategies and some tips to help get started. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Parents that are watching, you are certainly more than welcome to tune in. You can kind of take what we're talking about tonight and put a little spin on it to be able to use it in your own home. And I'll certainly be sharing those kinds of tips on the side too about how to use those in the home. I know that there are a lot of early intervention therapists out there also that are treating actually in the home. So before we get started, I wanted to let you know that I have a special announcement at the end that involves a special training that's coming up for how to help families put feeding strategies that they're learning into place in their home. For those of you that have worked with feeding, you know that this is a really huge challenge, because with the increase in feeding problems that we're seeing with children, we also know that it's a tremendous stress for the family when a child is not eating well. And the reason that feeding is such a difficult challenge for the parents is because it really affects the whole family. It's really not an isolated issue, and not to undermine other challenges that a child might be facing at all. But feeding is one of the most difficult to overcome because it really requires a lot of change, usually from everyone in the family. And that's difficult. That's difficult. We all have a hard time with change. So that special training, we're going to be talking about exactly how to help families do that in a really positive and effective and evidence-based way, so that the strategies that you're suggesting are super helpful and that parents feel really empowered to do the hard work that you're putting in with their child. Okay, so let's talk about where to begin with feeding challenges. I have three different strategies that I want to talk to you about tonight. And again, parents listening, this is me kind of thinking through my therapist lens tonight. So the very first thing that I like to do when I know that a child has significant feeding difficulties, and when I say significant, for me, significant feeding difficulties are any time that it's having an impact on family life. Okay, we are often using the word picky eater, right? That's a word that comes up, but really feeding problems expand well beyond that. And many picky eaters previously had feeding problems as babies and toddlers, and that they had a really difficult time transitioning to table food. Not always the case, but certainly some of the time. Or they didn't like certain tastes and textures of food, or they might have had a hard time chewing their food, or they gagged frequently. Some babies may have never been able to breastfeed. They may have had a difficult time taking a bottle. All of those factors are feeding difficulties, and it can start right away. Some children do not develop those feeding difficulties till later, but I'm really categorizing feeding difficulties as any of the above that I just mentioned. So let's just be clear about that. So the first thing that I really like to do is do a food diary. Okay, so this is kind of a classic strategy, and I want to mention it here, especially for new therapists or therapists new to feeding, if you're trying to even support feeding, if a family does not have any services and they are looking for help, if you're a parent right now and you're listening and you don't have access to resources, starting with a food diary is a really great place to begin. And as a therapist, it's one of the first things that I want to look at. So what I ask families to do is for 3 whole days to write down every single thing their child eats and drinks. I want to know if they had 3 sips of juice at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I want to know if they had a handful of crackers in the grocery store while they were trying to stay busy. I want to know every single thing that they actually eat or drink. Now, as a therapist, what I'm going to do at the end of those 3 days is I'm going to look at that food diary and I'm going to look for patterns, and I'm going to look for possible red flags that I see going on. I'm going to look to see if a child is eating enough quantity. So here's a little bonus tip. For what I first start to look for is, are they eating enough food or around enough food? That's an extremely subjective measure, but a general, and I do want to highlight, general rule of thumb is that for every year of age that a child is, so if they're 3 years old, they would eat 3 tablespoons at each meal of a protein, a carbohydrate, and a fruit or vegetable. That's 9 total tablespoons at a meal, assuming that they have about 5 meals a day. So I'm looking for that. I'm looking to see, are they more than that? Are they around that? Knowing that there's a lot of gray area there. But if it's significantly less than that, it shows me that there is a more significant need going on. And then I want to look closer at how the meals are spaced together. Okay, so even if you're a parent doing this, it's so incredibly helpful to just actually see it written down. Sometimes I find that we are often surprised by how much a child is actually eating, or how often we are actually spoiling their appetite. It doesn't seem very obvious as we're kind of moving throughout the day, but when we see it all written down on paper, there's a lot of eye-opening insights, let's say, that usually happen when you see all of the different foods that a child is eating over a you could certainly even do it over a 4 or a 5 day period. And you want to make sure that when you're doing this, the child is relatively healthy for sure. If they have a cold or aren't feeling well, it's probably better to skip that day, skip a couple days, and wait until you have a time period that the family is really going to be able to follow through on it. Because it can be really difficult, as I know, as a mom to 3 boys, to keep up with writing down every single day. So you want to make it really manageable for families, keep it in a nice short amount of time, and give them really clear directions on exactly what they're supposed to be doing. So the time of day, how much food, what they actually ate. And an estimate is fine. I don't want anybody getting out measuring cups and spoons and actually measuring that up. A simple summarization, mental measurement will certainly suffice. And any other valuable notes there are great too. It might be helpful to have a note there, gagged at the sight of oranges, or threw all of the spinach on the floor, whatever else that was, those are helpful insights to include also. This is the first step that really starts to give us clues on what strategies and what recommendations to begin making. So that leads us to number 2. So whatever you see on the food diary after a few days, it's really important to make sure that any child that is having feeding difficulties, and I believe any child at all, because I think it leads to really healthy eating habits, that they be eating every 2.5 to 3 hours. So that's counting from the start of one meal to the start of the next. And I know if you've been on here listening to me before, if you've taken my workshops, you've heard me talk about this, because I have, in my own family's life and in countless children that I have worked with, have I seen this make an enormous impact with what on the surface seemed to be a really severe picky eater. But what happens is children are not like us. They have not learned to overeat. So they will certainly fill up on just a small handful of crackers, because remember that their stomach is just the size of their tiny little fist. And they also are so busy and want to be doing other things. And if there's feeding difficulties and they don't like the way things feel, or it makes their stomach hurt, or it's hard to chew, they will get by on just taking the edge off of their appetite and not eat until they're full. So if they can have those couple of crackers and then you get home and they don't want to eat the chicken nuggets that you made them and have some fruit, that's probably why. Again, the food diary is going to show that, but regardless of what it shows, it's really important to draw that connection and make sure that the child is having their meals spaced with nothing in between but water, so when they do come to a meal, that they are completely hungry and they are really ready to go. Snacking will totally sabotage that. So that's something, if you're a therapist, if you're a teacher that's just supporting healthy eating habits and you're trying to just help give some helpful strategies, this is definitely one of the top things that I would recommend, and definitely something that you can give more specific advice and suggestions on once you have looked at the complete food diary, for sure. Okay, so far we've talked about using a food diary for 3 days. And second is getting on a schedule. It does not matter what time of day it is, but so that those meals are spaced apart. So those are the first two things. So if you're a therapist, perfect starting place. And if you're a parent that's listening right now, also a great starting place to just give you some insights and to really look at what's going on big picture. Okay, the third thing, okay? And this is, again, remember, in this lesson, I'm really looking through the therapist's lens here. So what I really want to start to think about right out of the gate as a therapist that's working on feeding difficulties is, what, if any, red flags am I seeing? Okay, because I can tell you, I can think of quite a few families I've worked with over the years right off the top of my head that I walked the door, thought there was really severe picky eating, was already starting to go through, like, is there something else going on? Do they maybe have acid reflux? Is it sensory? Is it oral motor skills? I'm kind of running through all these things in my head. I'm kind of trying to check those off in the conversations I'm having with the parents and while I'm observing the child. And of course, we talk about that schedule right away. In the very first session, I'm talking about that schedule. It's one of the first things that I really want families to understand because it's so important. And I come back the next week, and eating has significantly improved, significantly. Sometimes I've worked myself right out of the gig because it's improved so much just from that schedule change. So this is the next step that I'm looking at. It's not always, and there's other factors too, with sitting down at a table, having regular meal times, exposure to other foods. Of course, I could go on and on and on about all those things also. But when we're seeing kids that have real true feeding difficulties, have a very limited amount of foods, they're eating 4, 5, 10 foods only in their diet. They're refusing all other types of food, have to have their own specially prepared food, then I really want to start thinking about, what are the underlying factors? Is there something else going on? What is the root of this problem? Because it began for a reason. Children do not just stop eating or don't eat well in the beginning just to be bad or to make their parents crazy, even though it does. And many of you know that I had a child that put me through that personally too. And I was already an experienced OT when that happened. So I've lived both sides of it. So the root cause is so important. So as a therapist, I really want you to start to look through that lens in the very beginning. And it will take some time to sort out. You need to look for clues. I like to consider, is there any physical issue that could be going on? So at the top of that list is acid reflux, but there's a whole host of issues, much more unlikely, it's true, much smaller percentage of children that could have other issues like their stomach doesn't empty as fast. So, gastric emptying difficulties, and they don't get hungry. As well as some abnormalities in their anatomy and in their throat that make it difficult to eat. Those are things that we cannot diagnose, but it's a perfect thing to refer to a doctor, to refer to a GI doctor for more help, for sure. That's usually one of the last things that I consider, that I go to in the recommendation I make if I find nothing else. But the other two top areas that I'm really looking at, because I know that they're going to need addressed, are sensory and oral motor. So we talked about oral motor yesterday, and you guys can find a video on the oral motor exercises and skills and how to use those, kind of red flags to look for. As a quick recap, I will say, we're really looking for kids that are gagging after they've been chewing food for a while, or it's falling out of their mouth. Babies and toddlers will usually have a really hard time getting onto table foods or finger foods, or they only want to eat a certain kind. It has to be really soft because they just let it slide down their throat, or it has to be really crunchy so they can feel it better and manipulate and chew it better. That crunch helps them. We see kids falling into both categories when it's oral motor. But sensory is probably the biggest category that I see. So that's kids having a really strong preference for certain textures and even having a very real aversion to other textures. So I start to look at, does your child even like to get messy? If children don't like to get messy on their hands, they are not going to want to get messy in their mouth. There's a very strong correlation there. That's one of the first things I'm looking at with play. It's one of the first questions I'm asking families. I'm also looking to see, is there gagging at the sight, smell, taste, touch of food? That's a really good indication that there's a sensory issue going on underneath. So once I'm filtering that out, those are the things that I'm starting to think through, those are the things that I'm starting to problem solve through. As a therapist, I really want to focus on how to address the roots of those problems, right? Okay, so one of the best ways that I like to do that is to have up a simple list of questions that I can ask families. Many therapists have access to like a eating history form or an intake form, but many don't. That was something as an early intervention therapist that I was never certainly given, but there were a list of questions that I would ask for all of these sorts of triggers, right? So if we get the answers to those questions, it can give us really big insights and clues into what is going on with the underlying issue. And let me also say, I think most of you know probably listening to this, is that feeding is a multi-layered issue, even from a really young age. Babies, children learn really quickly, and there are multiple nuances to it. So even though it may start with sensory or oral motor or have a medical issue, and getting to the bottom of that is certainly a huge part of it. Other factors are still important, like that schedule and the routine and the structure around meals is another important layer to that, because if that's not there, eating is likely going to be a factor also. A child's individual temperament is a factor also. So all of these things kind of play together to create the perfect storm for making really severe picky eating difficulties. But getting to the root of the problem and addressing it is very important. And it's definitely something that I feel really strongly as our job as therapists. And I think most of you that are therapists that are specifically treating feeding difficulties would agree as well. Okay, so if I see some of you commenting here, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in now. I'm going to get to them and try to scroll through as many as I can. And if you're watching this later, please feel free to leave comments here. I will definitely come back and answer them for you guys. Before I go, though, I know that I've been talking about oral motor skills this week. I've been talking a lot about therapists getting the feeding background that they need. And I wanted to tell you about a very special discount that I have going on this week. I have a course that some of you may or may not know about. It's called Pediatric Feeding 101. Now, this course is an online course and it is just for professionals. I know some of you, my other courses are all geared towards parents, but this is a special course just for professionals. I have added all sorts of new updates to it, and I have all kinds of new handouts that go with it that allow you to download and print out to use in your practice. So you will get a detailed feeding history form with everything that we were kind of just talking about. You will get checklists of underlying causes and kind of how to help figure out what's going on and make those initial suggestions to families and have those handouts to give them. So that special bonus that I told you about at the very beginning, the special session that I'm going to be doing, it's a special live training just for people, professionals that are going to sign up for pediatric feeding between now and Sunday. This is a bonus training. It's live. It's not part of the regular class. But I know so many therapists, I hear this from you guys all the time, and believe me, as a therapist, I have lived it, and I know how important this is, the topic of how to get families to easily and effectively put the strategies that you're suggesting into place in the home. Like I said at the very beginning, this is a very important topic, and it's really a huge challenge for therapists, and we need to take it seriously because feeding is really hard, as I can testify as a parent. We need to make sure that we're being supportive and communicating the strategies that we're suggesting in a way that really works for families. So this bonus session, it's going to be live, and it's going to be just for the professionals that sign up by Sunday, is going to be held later this month. So that's a special bonus that's going on. And I'm also offering a special $10 off coupon now through Sunday. So if you're interested in getting some more pediatric feeding under your belt, if you want a nice introductory course, the whole course with the training will be about 2 hours. It's broken down into 3 different videos. You're going to learn all of the basics from beginning feeding milestones all the way through to extreme picky eating and how to manage that. So you're going to learn how to deal with delayed milestones, and you're going to get a nice foundation introduction that will give you the confidence and the skills to be able to really give actionable strategies to parents that very day. Honestly, you will really walk away feeling like, I know what to do now. And I know that there are many of you, I've heard from a lot of you this week about that are new therapists that are really trying to help feeding. And it's something that's not often covered, especially for OTs. It's not covered in our schooling except very minimally. But yet, again, we're seeing so many kids with feeding problems as OTs in particular, and as speech therapists and teachers that are coming across these issues a lot. We really need to be equipped because parents are asking these questions. And for those of you parents that are still listening on right now, please feel free to comment as well. I know you've had a whole host of experiences with different therapists, so it's really important to me to get some good foundation skills that are really easily accessible and really super affordable. Also, we know how expensive continuing education classes could be. So I'm really trying to go against that. The discount runs through Sunday. So you can grab that starting now, and you can find the link right in the top here. So if you have any questions about starting to overcome those feeding challenges, ask in the comment section. It has been wonderful to join all of you tonight. I have really loved talking about oral motor skills. That video was yesterday, and we talked a little bit about it today. If that was something that piqued your interest, the video section in my video section on your kids table, and you will find that video there as well. Okay, guys, I think that's it. Let me just make sure. I don't think I have any comment. I have a couple comments, but I don't think I see any questions, if any. Let me actually, okay. I think guys, just bear with me for a second. Okay, hopefully this isn't gonna, 2 comments. Let me see. I'm not seeing all of the comments. Okay, okay, here they come. Oh, thank you so much. Stop Parenting Alone says we send parents to your site often. Getting to the root cause is very important. Marlene, I think you have a question. I'm hoping it was just a comment. Marlene, if you asked, it is not letting me scroll. You know how technology can be. If okay, guys, I'm trying here. Thank you so much. Stop Parenting Alone. I'm seeing your comments pop up. Marlene, it's showing me that you left a comment, but I cannot see it. So I apologize. I will get to you if I am not seeing it. I thank you guys so much for joining me. Again, the link for Pediatric Feeding 101 is right at the top. Check it out. Take a look. Tons of awesome resources in there that you can share with families. You don't need my permission to do that. If you become a member of the class, you can download, print, use all of those. Oh, Marlene, I'm seeing your comment. It says take pics of food. Okay. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have a question. Thank you so much, you guys that are chiming in here with your lovely comments. All right, guys, have a question, ask me, and if not, have a very lovely evening. It was wonderful to spend some time with you.